What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Entrepreneur on Campus podcast. Let's go. My name is Matthew Brown. I'm a college student, I'm an entrepreneur, and I love learning. I've created this podcast to help you discover hidden opportunities. Morgan Glessing of Portal Entryways. Portal Entryways is a company that was founded a couple of years ago, and it has grown very quickly, as a lot of the companies that I interview have. And it's the company that, if you guys have seen, when you walk into a public building, there's a silver round button that's for people in wheelchairs that they can press that and the door will open slowly for them. And Portal Entryways is a company that has changed the way that works and is trying to become much bigger than it currently is. The company Portal Entryways is currently in a startup incubator in California, one which is very prominent, and they currently have a 7-figure valuation and with sales growing very quickly. So I'm really excited to introduce this interview with Morgan Glessing to you guys. What I really liked about it, we talked about the integration between software and hardware. We talked about getting into universities and selling to universities and how difficult that is, and we just talked about a lot of different things within those industries, and then also just business in general. So I think that this can be a very helpful interview, and I hope that you guys get the most out of it that you can. So here it is with Morgan Glessing. I'm here with Morgan Glessing, and super excited to be here. Thanks for being here with me, Morgan.
Yeah, no problem.
So Morgan has a very interesting company that he's been a part of, and I'd like to just dive right into the interview right now with you and ask you why did you decide to get involved with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think, just kind of giving my background. I grew up in Washington State, and I come from a very blue-collar family. My dad didn't graduate high school, so I wouldn't say we were poor. We were definitely kind of like lower middle class, and so I really saw how financial limitations could really put a strain on families growing up. I was the oldest child. I was very independent. So I think coming to college and really exploring, what was I going to make of myself? What do I want to do as a career? I really wanted to have that ability to kind of decide what I wanted to do with my life, as well as make a difference. But I also wanted to have that kind of financial stability. So I think there's lots of great options for people, but I wanted something I could be passionate about, and entrepreneurship really gave me an avenue where I could kind of have that creative drive to create something new, and not only that, but create something valuable that could really lead to kind of financial freedom for myself as well as those around me.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely all of our backgrounds make a big influence on what we want to do and the kind of lifestyle that we want to lead. So can you tell me a little bit about the company that you started, Portal, and kind of how that got going and where it's at today?
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I co-founded a company with a few other students across campus. So really my background is in business, so I really sought out people with different skill sets than me. So I found some students in engineering and design, and so we came together and we kind of became friends, and we really thought we want to find a problem to work on. We want to use our skill sets together to create something super valuable, and we also had a goal to have it be something that would help people, meaning social enterprise, and that for every time we were making a sale, we wanted to have a positive impact on the world around us. So kind of long story short, we were walking across campus one day talking, and we saw a student, and she was using a wheelchair, and she was just struggling to get through a door. I don't know if our listeners are familiar. There's these big silver buttons that kind of have a little wheelchair man logo looking on them. And so usually someone who uses a wheelchair will push this button, the door will slowly open, and then the person proceeds to the door. But in this instance, this girl was pushing this big silver button and the door was not opening. It was snowy outside, it was freezing. She tried opening the door herself. It was just kind of closing on her every 2 seconds. It was just terrible to watch, and we were probably 400 or 500 feet away, so it wasn't close enough for us to run over and open the door, but it really was just this long, drawn-out thing that's super hard to watch. And as much as I would say that, or as much as I would love to say that it was this magic moment of this light bulb hitting and saying, that's going to be a big idea to solve right there, a big problem for us to solve. It really wasn't. We were curious. We went over and we talked to her. We asked if we could, sit down and have lunch with her one day, because we thought what she was dealing with might be a problem. We wondered if other people dealt with it too. So we sat down and we got to know her, and she really complained that these doors are actually a struggle. All her life she's had to deal with getting in and out of buildings, and it's just never a very pleasant experience. People are always paying attention to her, always trying to help her. Sometimes it's helpful to help her, sometimes it's really not. She'd rather do it on her own. And ultimately she just really wanted to be independent. So after talking to Lauren, we thought, I wonder if Lauren's the only one. So we went and talked to more people who use a wheelchair. We kind of found that they shared similar sentiments. We conducted Facebook surveys. We conducted simple website reviews online. And ultimately we found that this thing that it's been the way it's been done for a couple decades was to have this button pushed to open the door. And as we kind of conducted a review, we thought, we wonder if we can create new technology where we could put a little smart device in the door, and then someone could have an experience where they could come up, and in some way that smart device would recognize them approaching the door, so that it would open. So we, again, long story short, we created a company called Portal Entryways. Portal Entryways is really about using new forms of hardware and software to make accessibility to public spaces much more enjoyable. So we created a little Bluetooth device so that we can attach onto any of those motorized handicap doors. And then when someone downloads our app, whether it's iOS or Android, the phone can stay in their pocket. As they approach a door, it'll open up hands-free, peace of mind. It'll never close on them again, and they can safely proceed into the building. So this kind of the origin story back when we first saw the students about a year and a half ago. Our company is growing. Recently it was accepted into Y Combinator. The company currently has a 7-figure valuation with sales strongly growing, and we're really just excited to be able to make a positive impact on the physical accessibility environment in the world in which we live.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, and I love that this product and this company is doing something that really can make such a big difference in people like that girl that you mentioned in her life, right? So you mentioned that it's a hardware and a software product. As I was preparing a little bit for this interview, I was thinking about all of the different avenues that you guys have been involved in. A lot of this audience that's listening is people who are on campus, college students, and we're constantly looking at the problems that exist within colleges, right? So I think it's really unique that you've been able to create a business and selling most of that to universities themselves. So I would like to ask you, was it difficult, or did it go smoother than planned when you guys created the hardware and the software, and to get them to intermingle, to mesh? Was that difficult? Was it not too bad? How did you guys do that?
No, that's a great question. It was extremely difficult. I think it's just a recurring theme in entrepreneurs themselves is to be overly optimistic. Ultimately, like even with our diverse skill set, of having people on our team who could code and also could solder and build designs, none of us had actually created what we would call a sellable product before. Between our team, we'd mingle with things and created fun designs and got lights turning on and working, sounds beeping, but it was really the first time where someone was going to pay us a 5-digit contract to do something for them every year. We had to provide white glove level service,
right?
And we needed it to work every single time. And really, a difficulty we often had was essentially like everyone knows what Bluetooth is and what Bluetooth does. Everyone thinks you get in your car, your phone's going to pair to your car and it's going to start playing music through speakers. So it seems like an old technology that really it's straightforward, but once you get down to like the granular level, Bluetooth is an ever evolving technology, and what we wanted to use it for was actually pushing the boundaries of its limitations. So when we first really defined the problem, once we knew the experience that our customers needed to have, we felt like Bluetooth was the most viable option to make it happen. But when we first started working on it, it was really 50-50 for probably about almost a year as to whether the technology could actually work. So we would have days where we would consult with professional experts from the standard Bluetooth group of the entire world, and we'd finally get them on the phone or email, and they would say, yes, this can be done. You're gonna have to be very specific about it. It's not gonna be easy. You're gonna do lots of testing, and we would be on a high note. This would be awesome. We're gonna be the first ones to do this type of thing, and it's awesome. And then a week later, we would be like, you know what, this isn't gonna work because we didn't, consider this variable, and all these things are gonna happen. There's just so many moving parts. So not only was the hardware hard to build, but then you also have to build the software that's never really been used in this certain way before. And then on top of that, you have to get them to work together in real time, very quickly. So it was an amazing challenge. It's one of those things, like looking back, I don't ever want to do something like that again, but at the same time, I know I'm going to have to. And that's really where a lot of personal growth happened. I think what we were doing was ambitious, and we definitely took a risk. There was a really high chance that what we were doing, the technology just flat out could not work. Maybe it was going to need a few more years to develop and to become a little more efficient, but we took a bet saying, okay, if we start working on this now, we think in a year the technology will be there, and that's been the time when we'll be ready to go and service our customers. So we kind of made a calculated bet. I think from day one we started working on it, the technology wasn't there, and luckily we got honestly just kind of lucky, and they released some updates that allowed us to do some new things, and people every year are getting newer phones that have better capabilities to work with. So it was really a mitigating risk across the board, and we just took it.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you were a student at the time. You still are a student.
Correct.
And everybody that you were working with, were they also students?
Yes. Since the founding of the company a year and a half ago, some of us have graduated, but originally, we were all students here on campus full-time.
So you're dealing with problems like that, and then you're having your classes and schooling at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, it's
busy time of life.
Very. It's a difficult. I'll be honest, I've never been one to be concerned about getting an A in every class. I think what we learn is important, and I think there's lots of lessons we can learn, but if I think back on what have I learned the last couple of years, like my mind immediately resorts to my experiences with the companies, and a lot of what I learned in classes have supported that. But being frank, we got so busy that we all dropped to part-time school, so really, having that requirement to, I was traveling all around the country, meeting with potential customers and clients, and attending trade shows to learn more about our industry, and in the back of my mind is some test I have to take online by midnight. So I'm not the best student, not even close, but I do feel like I've gained really valuable experiences through what we've created and built. So it's ultimately a fine balance, and a lot of people will have to make that decision. I totally think it's possible to get straight A's and build a startup. You just may not sleep. So
right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you even have decided, so you parted ways a little bit with Portal now, and you're at school.
Yep.
And does that have to do with at all your desire to be here at school and the opportunities that come with being here?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is something I think about a lot, but I'm not really sure if I've ever really known the correct answer.
Right.
A couple months ago, I made a hard decision that I wanted to let my co-founders run the company full-time, and I was going to finish school because the company was moving to San Francisco. So for me, I was kind of at a point where if I had a lot of school left, I honestly think I would have just dropped out. So this is, as of last summer, I was really thinking about, do I want to go back to school? Do I want to start a new company? And I had 2 semesters left, so I ultimately made a decision that I'm just going to finish it, kind of get it over with. It's not going to be hanging over my head anymore of like, should I finish school? Should I finish school? So ultimately, I've made a decision to come back to school. I'm finishing as quickly as possible. And now when April rolls around, I really have that freedom to, not have that commitment.
Yeah.
That my test is due at midnight.
Then you can dedicate all of your time
Correct.
To something that you want to do.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So your company has a lot of interesting facets, as I mentioned. Can you briefly go into how you guys were able to receive funding?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs are hesitant because of lack of money, right? So can you just go over like how you guys were able to receive your funding?
Yeah. No, yeah, funding is a valid concern. We were amazingly lucky in that because we were college students, there are so many resources available for free funding, whether those be some kind of grant you can apply for, all the way up to these kind of prestigious national student competitions that you can kind of funnel through your school and, you know, go and represent, in our case, BYU.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, over the 2018 school year, we won probably about a dozen student startup competitions.
It's incredible.
So we didn't win every competition we went to, probably about 2/3 of them. And so through all these competitions we applied to, the hundreds of hours we spent analyzing our business and designing presentations and
Wow.
just repeating them over and over. We raised about $250,000.
Wow.
And just free cash funding for student competitions. So our business honestly required capital. I think there's some startups that are awesome because you kind of just get going. You can create a $5 website online and just start
selling.
start putting the rubber to the ground. But in our case, that just wasn't possible.
Had to build it first.
We had to buy hardware. We had to buy 20 different parts. We had to solder them all together. We had to spend hours building them. We had to test them. We also had to build software. Some of it was honestly out of our leagues. We're having this constant debate of, you know, do we spend 500 hours learning how to code this, or do we spend time working a side job on the side and then pay someone else to code it so that way it can get done faster? Just constant discussion.
What did you guys end up doing?
There was a very few times we hired contractors to help us speed things up, but I would say ultimately we built all of
Most
our own.
of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a few times like we had contractors we wanted to hire as full-time employees. We just couldn't afford them as full-time employees.
Right.
Yet, so we would hire them for little spurts here and there until we got enough funding to be able to hire them full-time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, for us, that $250,000 was awesome because it was, like I said a minute ago, it was free cash funding.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to win these competitions. The organizing entity would write us a check, and we had a deposit in our bank account, and then we had full freedom to do whatever we want with no strings attached with that money. So we were very frugal with how we spent that money. We tried to make it stretch as far as possible. And even early in the life of our company, we actually received offers from angel investment groups or even kind of smaller venture capital groups, but we turned them all down. They were very attractive at the time. It was really exciting to have someone approach you and say, hey, I think this is awesome.
Yeah.
I myself, am a venture capitalist, and I've invested in stuff like this before, and I've sold 3 companies of my own, and I think this has potential. It's super cool to hear someone like that say something. And, you really want to team up with them. That's really when you see, those stories of, how Facebook were built and these other companies. For us, it just didn't feel right. We felt much more comfortable saying, let's be friends, but we're not going to take your money. We definitely want your help, whatever advice you have, but we felt confident that we could continue to raise cash through student competitions.
Mm-hmm.
And so recently the company took its first round of funding, but it's a very favorable terms. So it finally got to the point where we felt like the exchange was actually worth it. And it was a very, I would say it's probably one of the most entrepreneur-friendly deals I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so we really were able to kind of bypass the seed round because we essentially received a seed round from student competitions.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I also want people to understand that, when people go in these competitions, it's totally possible for tons of startups to raise funding through this, but at the end of the day, there really is only one winner. And I think it's important to realize, I've seen lots of student companies win these competitions and raise tons of money and never amount to a real business. I've seen others that never can somehow make it into the competitions. They always get denied. Maybe they're just not good at applying or presenting their ideas in an informative way, but they go on to become these multi-million-dollar businesses. So it's really not an indicator of success. For us, it was
a form of funding.
Yeah, it was a form of funding. It's something we were good at. We were good at giving presentations.
Yeah.
And effectively communicating what we were trying to get across and making it very simple to understand and showing how it was a very profitable model. So
yeah,
we did well, and I think we had a lot of advantage because we were working on it for so long before that.
Yeah.
So
fantastic. I love that. So you also mentioned to me before this interview about a program that Portal was able to just enter in. And you mentioned that very few companies are actually entered into that. Can you explain that a little bit? I'd love to learn about it.
Yeah, so the more you learn about startups and kind of the entrepreneurship environment, you'll learn there's a lot of lingo. One word you'll hear people throw around a lot is called a startup accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
Startup accelerators are programs that usually do one of a few things or multiple of a few things. And that startup accelerator is a program that, let's say I have a startup, me and Matt here, we create the Tree Company. The Tree Company might apply to a program That's a startup accelerator in Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
What the startup accelerator usually does is it'll take in tons of applications, and they're going to select 10 companies to then move to Denver, Colorado for 6 months. They'll give you funding. You're going to be working on your idea all day, every day, and you're going to create these kind of goals. By the end of 3 months, you're going to do this. And so they usually take a little bit of your company,
Mm-hmm.
but in exchange, you'll get funding, you'll get awesome resources around you, a network of mentors.
They're just going to help you blow up.
Any way possible. Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's usually a win-win for both sides. They get a small piece of an awesome company coming in, and the company gets not only funding, but hands-on,
Value.
one-to-one, very direct help.
Hmm.
So one thing that happened to our company, which is very exciting, was we were admitted into what's called the Winter 2019 batch of Y Combinator. There's lots of startup accelerators all over the world, but in my opinion, Y Combinator is the most prominent startup accelerator. Companies they've taken in at our similar stage that we now know are Airbnb, Reddit,
Wow.
Dropbox, Twitch. There's tons of others.
So it's national then. Where's it found? Where is it?
It's San
found?
Francisco.
In San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, they just have an amazing track record of taking in these companies that are still very small and no one knows about, and just turning it into these multi-billion-dollar unicorns, as we call them. Unicorns just meaning a startup that's valued at over $1 billion.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really excited for my co-founders to kind of progress the company. They're currently a part of that program.
Yeah.
They're living in San Francisco.
Wow.
That's where the company is currently located. And at the end of this program, they have what they'll call a demo day. They'll invite prominent investors, a lot of famous network people from all over the world, and they'll get a chance to present the company that we created to them at the end of March.
Wow.
So it's a very in this case, Y Combinator is in the truest form an accelerator. It'll really grow the company very quickly.
Well, that's incredible. I wasn't aware of that opportunity, and also that all those big companies went through there, and so hopefully that can really turn out for them.
Yeah, I think they're going to do great.
That's great. So changing subjects a little bit, I am curious about. I talked about lots of college students are looking at opportunities in the university. I think I talked to a lot of people that come up with different ideas for backpacks, and it's very common, right, on campus. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are after selling to universities about how saturated that market is, and maybe if there's some problems there or opportunities that you've seen. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. I'll kind of divide my answer into two parts.
Perfect.
So I want to make clear, like, a lot of student startups, their ideas revolve around some sort of problem they have because they're a student. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We live in a very isolated world as students. Sometimes we feel like we have a lot of exposure. We've left our homes. We're now living on our own, and now we know what the real world is like. But the fact is that you're in college, and most college students are poor. You don't have very much money to spend on something. You're very routine, meaning you do the same few things every single day. And the fact is you actually don't have a lot of exposure to how real industries work. So I do a lot of mentoring, and for the most part, I actually advise people to stray away from solving a college student's problem. You're taking one of the poorest demographics and you want them to pay for something more. It's kind of counterintuitive. So that's kind of honestly my opinion on that, just because there's such a broad world around us and we have such an innovative mindset. If it can be applied to things where people have been kind of trapped in these industries for 20, 30 years that no one's paying attention to,
right, that's
when you can really create value, because you're bringing a new mindset. It's really saying, like, I'm unfamiliar to this environment, and so you can see the inefficiencies that people that have been in there, they just can't see anymore, even though it's right in front of them. On the other side of the equation is, for example, with the startup we created, Portal Entryways, one of our largest customer segments was actually universities, and it's kind of ironic to say what I just said and then now tell you that the company that I created was
involved with universities,
heavily reliant upon universities purchasing a product. And it's kind of an interesting topic. I would say that we did not intend to target universities. If someone came to me and told me that they wanted to sell something to university, I would honestly probably recommend don't do it. When you talk about a sales cycle meaning, like, how long does something take from a customer getting introduced to a product to actually purchasing and using it? If I want to buy something on Amazon, I get it in 2 days and I'm using it in 2 days. A university might take 2 years. simply because it's really not one person that makes a decision, especially if they're a state-funded organization.
A lot of red tape.
Lots of red tape, lots of bureaucracy. You need everyone nodding their head at the same exact time saying, yes, let's do this. And then who knows what still needs to happen. I would honestly say we were a little bit lucky with our startup because as we worked in accessibility, institutions like colleges are held to very high standards. So when we were able to introduce something that kind of created a new status quo, we were able to say, hey, look, there's a new way of doing this, and it's actually a lot more enjoyable. Not only that, but it's safer, and it's faster, and it might even be cheaper. So when we were able to show this to a college who's held liable if a door closes on a student, who has government standards they have to uphold, and their doors aren't currently meeting those standards, and we say, you can use this, and we can have it installed in 5 minutes per door, and it's going to meet your standards, and it's going to take all the stress away from your life. I think we just got lucky that they were able to push those sales through a lot faster because they have the federal government behind them saying, are you doing this? Are you doing this?
Right.
Are you doing this? Whereas if you're trying to sell them something where they don't necessarily need it, it's more of a want. It's going to take a lot longer. You're going to do a lot more convincing. Whereas we were able to show something that took liability away. It was from a legal standpoint, it was smarter for them to buy a product than to not. So for them, they may not even have wanted it, but they felt like they had to have it because it was creating new status quo. Right. So we were really lucky in that regard.
It was just a perfect opportunity at a perfect time.
Yeah. It essentially, a lot of our kind of sales strategy was, just learning, like, how do products in this market work? Like, it was a very, the way, my generation might think of how to purchase things, we're very review oriented. We get online and we see how many reviews something has. We watch a YouTube video about it. We want to learn every single detail about, if I'm going to make a large purchase, what am I getting into? Whereas the people I was meeting with that were, deciding whether to buy our product, they're much more old school, I would say. They want to call someone on the phone. They want to trust that person. And if they trust that person, they'll make the purchase, and they don't even need to see it. They might want a demo. Show me something for 30 seconds if it works. If it's not going to work, you're going to take it back and I want my money back. But they're not as, initially they don't dig as much. Yeah. So it really was a totally different environment. So it really just comes down to, like, not only in startups, this is why it's so hard to build a valuable one, is of, how do I find a problem to solve? What's the idea to solve that problem? But you also have, once you've even created the product, an entire issue of, how does my customer expect to get that product? And should I do what they expect, or am I going to force them to see that there's actually a better way to search for a product? Yeah. And if you look in demographics at large, we used to go to stores and try things on. And for example, buying shoes online, people hesitated to buy shoes online for a long time, simply because we hated that idea of what if the shoe doesn't fit. Whereas now we're so much more comfortable with ordering a shoe and the return process that we're not as hesitant to buy it. Right. So there's just so many decisions that go into the entire start and end point for a startup. Wow. From a product getting delivered. Lots of things that you don't think about when you're sitting there and you get excited about an idea. Right. But each problem in itself is honestly a startup of its own. So. Wow.
So what I kind of got out of that was selling to college students, probably not the best idea. Maybe there's some exceptions, but it's a pretty poor demographic. And then selling to universities. Universities tend to have a good amount of money, but there is a lot of red tape involved. And it sounds like it's going to take a long time. Yeah. So unless it's a very innovative product, maybe not the fastest way to be able to receive some money, right? So just really quickly want to launch into this last industry before closing the interview. So you worked with a lot of handicapped people, and that's what your product was based around, was helping them. Have you seen that there are a lot of products to assist these people, and have you seen that there's still a lot of pains that haven't been answered there?
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a great question. So for example, like in the vertical that we were targeting in the accessibility industry, we were really focused around the accessibility of physical spaces. So to give you some context, right now there's a really big push between government regulations and lots of things to make software accessible. every time you visit a website, you have an app on your phone, the operating system on your computer, everyone is making moves to become more accessible. Now, there's a million softwares coming out of how to do this, or or should we centralize it and have everyone decide what the most accessible thing is. For someone using a website that might have vision disability, or all these kind of possibilities that are out there. But what we noticed was, while there's a huge focus on web oriented things, no one had looked at like physical accessibility in a while. Google does some clever things with like Google Maps of like helping people to get around and kind of saying out loud how to get around. But we found that every building has a door, and so when we thought about like if we saw this one girl struggling to get through one door, how many doors like that are in the world? And while there may not be, kind of people's instinct is to say, there's not that many people who use a wheelchair, so this can't be that big of a problem. But once you sit in a wheelchair and you try it out yourself, it's a pretty big problem.
Yeah.
And with government, the federal government saying, every building has to have so many what they would call accessible entrances. And when they say accessible, they have a very clear code that door has to meet in order to say, yes, this is an entrance we've deemed accessible. So for us, it was interesting because there's in the market we were in, the people who created the door, the people who created the motor that was put on the door to open it, as well as the people who created the silver button that you could push to open it. They make improvements to these products every year, but they never really thought about recreating the entire experience. So essentially, people have been using the same thing for the last 20 years, and no one had come in and said, imagine if we were to take this away and start from scratch. Like, what would we actually do now with technology available now?
Just such a part of the physical world already. Yeah. Everyone was used to it.
And it's interesting to think, just because these companies are amazingly large companies. They're multi-national companies. They're worth billions of dollars. They have huge amount of resources they can put into research and development and creating these things. But for them, these things are just such what we call a cash cow. People need them. You have to have them when you build any building, so you just order some more of them. And so they just mass produce and they just send them out there, and they make a lot of money on these. Yeah. So when we were coming in, it was really just to us, it was so obvious because we can now see the light once we saw that experience and we talked to real people. And we even got to know our competitors as time went on. Once we learned more about their products, and we would demo out theirs, and as we were trying to figure out how to price ours, we really had to know the ins and outs of everyone in our industry. As we spoke with salesmen and managers from our would-be competitors who were selling these buttons, it was funny to hear them say, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never considered this. I've never thought it can be improved. It never even crossed my mind. So I do believe that there are other avenues in this industry to go down. Honestly, I don't really know what they are. We do one thing really well right now, and we're proud to do it. We have inclinations of other things we want to do, but we haven't really validated them. So when I say validate, I mean we don't really know could a profitable model created around this. We've seen things here and there, and that's ultimately what I recommend a lot of people do. It's really easy to get caught up and say we're in such a high tech world that all the biggest and best problems to be solved are being solved in some way by someone. But what people don't realize is humans are creatures of habit. We tend to fall into routines. We don't like change. And so if you can really find these industries and they're oftentimes the things that are right in front of you, you just can't see because you are one of the people that are so used to it as well. It really allows you to put yourself somewhere where you're a total stranger. You're totally out of your comfort zone, because it'll cause you to reevaluate everything around you and to kind of challenge the status quo and say, I know you've been doing this for 20 years, but
what if we did this?
Yeah, what if we did this? And most of the time the person will say, no, I've been doing this for 20 years. So, you sit right there and let me tell you how this is done. But
maybe that's the wrong person to ask, right?
Yeah, honestly, most of the time they probably are right.
Yeah.
But the fact is, every once in a while, you'll come into something, you'll say, look, no, this can be done a different way, and we should do it a different way because, this is more profitable, this is easier, and it's a better, easier experience.
Challenging the norms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of industries that are like that. A lot of students at colleges tend to focus on products for consumers, and I think that's awesome. if you want to make a new widget for like your kitchen or your car, those things, I still think there's a million opportunities to be done. But I think we could also make such a difference in bringing such a different mindset to these industries, having what we call a business-to-business industry, where you have these corporations, and a corporation, if they can buy something that's going to make them more money, if they paid $10,000 for some software you provide per month, they don't care how much it costs when it's making them $100,000 every month, because you improve something that they've been doing for 10 years and you just made it more efficient, reduce their costs, increase profitability. So those types of industries are very responsive. If I can find something that makes a corporation more money, they're going to say yes to it very quickly, because every day they're waiting to make a decision, they're losing money if it actually works out.
Right. Everyone's willing to trade $1 for $2.
Yep. So I really recommend, like, there's so many industries like that, and a lot of them might even be old school, and they're things that a lot of people use the word sexy when you're talking about an industry. It's not a sexy industry to go look at how coal mining is done or like things like that, but the fact is, because no one is excited to talk about it, and it probably means no one's looked at it for a while. So I would highly recommend going into swim upstream. Go where people aren't thinking to go.
Wow, I love that. That was extremely insightful, and honestly, this entire interview has been super packed full of gems of knowledge within these different industries, and I really appreciate that. I'll just end with these last 2 questions, just to learn a tiny bit more about you. I'm curious what and you could state this really briefly, but your process of goal setting. Do you set weekly goals, monthly goals? How do you do that in your own life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I'm more of probably like a 3-month goal kind of person. That's actually a goal I have. The irony of saying it, I want to be more of a daily goal setter. I think it makes people
driven,
incredibly
and
effective
focused.
if they can say, if I want to do something in a month, how do I break it down by week and then by day?
Right.
I think that's really where success is created. A lot of what I do in my personal life, it's also reflected on what I'm doing professionally or at school. Something I've noticed is that variables change a lot for me, especially in the startup environment. I noticed a million times where we were doing something and it was our goal to do this by 2 months, but we would get 2 weeks into it, and for whatever reason that goal was either something we didn't want anymore because something else changed, or it wasn't attainable for some reason, or it was too small or too big. And so just constantly readjusting, and that's where it kind of go against me and say I'm not going to set some daily goal when I keep changing the end goal every couple months.
Right.
But I think being goal oriented is incredibly effective. I think in my life I have a goal to read a book a month. That's something I find very effective. I try to kind of alternate between I would say probably about 2/3 of what I've read lately are kind of like your typical biography or like a startup help book or something kind of life or business oriented. But I also love to just throw in the occasional fiction. I kind of like to maintain that humanities element and to
imagination
creative side. Yes. Yeah. I think it's very important to have that balance. So
fantastic. And the last question going along with that is, do you have a morning routine? That's a really hot topic. Everyone's talking about that. Do you have a morning routine?
I mean, that's a great question. I don't know if I have a special morning routine I can rant about. I mean, I'm very, like I was mentioning earlier, I'm a creature of habit. So I usually wake up. I love granola, so I kind of make a big bowl of granola cereal. Then I usually sit down at my desk, and that's kind of my time to kind of gear up for the day. I'll spend 20 minutes thinking about, okay, what do I got going on today? I look over my calendar. I kind of sift through my emails and kind of respond as needed, things that came in overnight. And then usually jump in the shower, get dressed, and then I get in the car
and get going. Love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Morgan Glessing, thank you for being on this today. It's been a pleasure, and best of luck with everything.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Morgan Glessing and that you were able to find it as insightful as I was able to find it. And hopefully you can move forward knowing better what you want to do or what you don't want to do. And if nothing else, then you can know more about what we talked about today. So if you guys like this podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating, a review. It helps the podcast grow so that more people can hear about this, can learn about different industries. What I've learned is that as you share valuable insights with other people, people are more willing to help you and share opportunities with you. So anyway, have a great one, guys. Thanks. Love you. Bye.